Well, could you talk about maybe the best part of being on a spacewalk? Is there a best
absolutely.
part, or because we've talked about difficult stuff?
The best part, again, like so many aspects of spaceflight, in a way, the best part for me was probably the camaraderie, the part of being a big team, doing something important, interesting, unusual, difficult, challenging, but really amazing, which is assembling the International Space Station. Occasionally, you got to enjoy the other best part of the spacewalk, which was the view. And I remember a couple of instances. Once we were connecting wiring for heaters on the underside of the International Space Station. And before you made a connection in space, they wanted the folks on the inside of the space station to turn off power to the thing you were about to use, disconnect, connect. And they said, well, we're not quite ready for you. We need you to wait 5 minutes while we go send somebody to turn off the power for this thing. And they said, just enjoy the view. And hardly ever does Mission Control say, take a break for 5 minutes and enjoy the view. So that was a real gift. And I remember I was holding onto handrails. I remember pushing the handrail up so that my head went down. I looked down at the earth below me, and I was coming up over the UK. And it was, I think early-ish morning local time. So the sun was shining obliquely, and it was a thin overcast. You could sort of see London through the overcast a bit. And I remember looking down thinking, wow, I used to live down there. How interesting to suddenly see it from up here. Another time I was installing handrails, and these times could have been separated by mere minutes, right? But I was installing handrails, and I noticed this bright light, but not from the sun, from below me. And I looked down, and as far as the eye could see below me, it was gold. I mean, bright gold, like illuminated gold, jewelry gold. And
wow.
I looked down, and I was over the Saudi Arabian peninsula, and it was gold as far as the eye could see. It was just beautiful. So there were many moments like that, but they were brief moments where you got to see some spectacular views. And it's different from seeing these views from inside a spacecraft. You feel closer to them because you only have a few inches of air and, I don't know, a quarter of an inch of plastic face shield between you and hundreds of miles of vacuum and then the thing you're looking at.
Yeah, but it sounds like it was really special, and just, gosh,
it was special. It was
you can't really capture that in a photograph even. That's just kind of, that is amazing. And I envy you. So,
I'd like to go do it again. So
fair enough. I think a lot of folks would, who'd ever been on these missions. And you say you've actually kept in touch with your crewmates. Do you guys ever kind of reminisce and talk?
We do. We reminisce about things. We also talk about the future of spaceflight a lot and other things like that. So, yep, we do reminisce. But mostly the reminiscing, I think I do on my own. I see photographs of other people flying in space or views from space, or sometimes I see the photographs I took or were taken of me, and those bring back a lot of memories. Yeah.
There's this one photo that you always had on the Blue Origin site, and I teased you about it for a while because it seemed like you were taking a selfie deliberately in space. But
that's me hanging from the bottom of the space station, I think. Yes.
Which EVA was that?
I think that was.
Recall?
I'm trying to remember. I think that was EVA number 3.
Ah, okay. So you're already a learned scholar of spacewalking.
Somewhat, slightly experienced. How about that? Slightly experienced.
Fair enough. Did you ever find yourselves in situations where you had to hack something together quickly, like sort of using gray tape or duct tape? This has come up in some folks talk about the necessity to do that on the space station before, and I was wondering if you'd run into it.
No, not as much as you would expect. We've all seen Apollo 13, which is really one of my favorite space movies of all time, where duct tape and ingenuity were really central to the plot. I would say the thing that I hacked, that most astronauts I knew hacked the most, were the procedures. we would launch with a set of procedures that we thought were going to cover not just the tasks we had to do, but all the contingencies we could reasonably foresee. And then something would change, and you'd need to do something else. And you'd have to take the bits of the task, the bits of the procedure that you developed, and rearrange them or add things or delete things. And so we were constantly hacking our procedures. But we tended not to hack with the hardware, because I think by the time I flew in space, people knew what tools they needed. They knew what spares they needed. We didn't do the kind of fun stuff you see in Apollo 13 with duct tape and cardboard and filters that weren't the right size, because people had learned that lesson. Now, you didn't fly a vehicle with one size filters and dock with a vehicle with a different kind of filter. If we were making that system today, both vehicles they'd use a common filter, so that in a crisis you could just go
you could swap it out
from the other vehicle.
Absolutely.
Just swap them out. That's arguably they should have done that in the Apollo program, right? That would have been the really, I mean, it was what they did was really clever, and they got everybody home safely, which is all that matters. But an even cleverer way to have solved that problem, with hindsight, it's easy to say this, would have been not to have that problem, to have common filters in the two vehicles.
Yeah, you designed a solution.
And then we'd never, but how boring would that be? We'd never have heard the wonderful story. People wouldn't have had to use their creativity.
And Tom Hanks wouldn't have gotten to make that movie.
Tom Hanks wouldn't have made a movie. And it's an inspirational story. I think a lot of people really have realized that kind of quick thinking and the ability to cobble things together on short notice from the available supplies is actually a real skill, and not just in spaceflight. In the whole of engineering, that's a real skill. The ability to take things that weren't meant to do a job and in a time of need, make them do that job for you.
So you have to be physically and mentally adept, brilliant, and also MacGyver.
You have to be able to be a MacGyver. But fortunately, we didn't do too much of that on my two space flights.
Well, that's lucky, because I often wonder about that, and like, how often does that really come up? And nowadays, it seems like there's always somebody living on the space station, and it's just like, oh gosh, imagine there's little things you hear about, like the leaking problems, especially towards the Russian part of the space station, where they had to kind of lock that down and fix some things, and it's been up there a little while. So there's little things going wrong with it. So I often wonder.
I have a great example of somebody being a good MacGyver. A colleague of mine flew on the space station early, and he was a scientist. He is a scientist and a great DIY person, and he wanted to drill holes in something metal, and I forget why. I think he was improving on the table that the first space station crew had assembled from spare parts, because the space station flew without a table. He was worried about those little bits of metal that fly off when you do drilling or machining on things. Those bits are called swarf, and he came up with an ingenious way of containing the swarf. He put a large bead of shaving foam on the metal before he cut it, before he drilled into it. And that both acted as a lubricant and coolant for the metal, but it also trapped all the little metal filings that were liberated by the drilling.
Shaving foam.
Isn't that clever? So,
yeah.
There are always ways to be clever and have a first in space by inventing a way to do something in zero G that people have done here on Earth all the time. We use gravity, right? All that swarf falls down into a bin under the lathe or the drill.
Oh, yeah.
And it's collected, and that's easy. You don't have to worry about it floating around and getting in your eye. But in space, you have to worry about that. And he came up with this really clever solution.
And I imagine probably 100 other solutions for other little things too.
Yeah.
Necessity
is the mother of invention, as they say.
Yeah, that is true, for sure. I wanted to close today's interview with a question that kind of it came up last night, so I apologize for not kind of having it prepared, but I thought about this, and you were mentioned kind of like maybe wanting to go back to space in the future, but there's a lot of focus on the moon these days with the Chinese station and Artemis 1, which is delayed, but it's hopefully Tuesday, I hope. if you had a chance to work on the moon, would you go out there? I mean, with your kids?
It's not a hard question, Karina. Absolutely. Sign me up.
Yeah.
I've wanted to walk on the moon since I was a young boy, and I didn't obviously make it to the moon. I'm not sad about that because I had a great time flying in space and in the career that prepared me for that and ever since. But I would really, really, really love to walk on the moon. That would be another dream come true. So absolutely, in a heartbeat.
Wow. What is the ultimate extent of time that you'd be willing to share? Like, because, you have a little bit of gravity. It's more stable than just kind of floating in space to some degree. It's also kind of a meteor shooting gallery, but but at the same time, it's more stable. So how long would you be willing to actually live there?
It's a good question and a difficult one to answer. I think I got two answers for you. One is it depends on what kind of facilities they had. If I had to go live in the capsule I landed in, like say the lunar module for Apollo, if I had to live in that, then probably a reasonable limit's days or a week. If you could go out of that lander into a larger moon base, then potentially a very, very long time. And then I think something else sets the limit. It's not how long could you put up with it as a living condition. It's how much do you have to do there? Do you have enough to keep you busy and feeling useful? Because having a job to do is really a great thing. I mean, it gives you purpose. It keeps
your mind
busy,
occupied.
Keeps you occupied. If I didn't have a job, the answer would be not that long. And if I had something to do, whether it be science or engineering or maintenance or construction, then potentially a very long time. I'd love to spend 6 months or a year on the moon, I think, with the right facilities. And then the limit becomes maybe radiation or some other medical limit. How long can they leave you up there before they need to get you home and give you an ultrasound and x-rays and worry about the radiation exposure you've had on the moon, which could be significant.
That's the other thing. And I hadn't thought about it till you mentioned it, where it's just, we haven't really done a lot of studies on folks living on the moon where they need to actually have x-rays for the lack of, they don't have Earth's atmosphere to kind of protect them from the sun's radiation, and they would have also kind of maybe even bone density problems again. So there's all sorts of things that come up just for living in space or off the planet.
I think the bone density problem is largely solved through exercise. I think the medical community in spaceflight is, I think, essentially in agreement that we know how to control bone density loss and muscle mass loss.
What about vitamins? Or are there lots of
exercise? It's exercise. You
Fair
give
enough.
people plenty of exercise, and space station crews do 2 hours a day, an hour of weightlifting and an hour of aerobic exercise. And we've had astronauts come back from the space station with better bone density than they went up with because they're just exercising a lot, and that's good. But there are new problems. There's the spaceflight associated neuroocular disorder. There is the radiation problem.
Yeah.
That's not that new, but it's not a solved problem by any means. There are other things going on that we will need to get better at, to understand better and have countermeasures for if we're going to send people into space for a long period of time.
Space,
they're not all solved problems.
Yeah, with access to space getting less expensive, I'm sure that's the solutions for that are right around the corner to some degree.
The good news, I think, from this point of view about access to space getting cheaper is it means you don't have to send one person for a year. You could send 4 people for 3 months each. If the access is cheap, you don't have to do one long mission. And that means you don't have to subject people's bodies and minds to the rigors of a really long mission as much. Now, if you want to go to Mars, it is a long mission. There's no way around that. But inexpensive access to space will help with these medical problems.
Yeah, for sure. I still don't know why Elon is fixated on Mars, but it just doesn't seem...
It's a beautiful planet. I think it's been in people's minds for centuries, right? Everyone wants to know
with the storms,
what would it be like to live there?
The extreme cold. I'm just... I don't know. I would be hesitant, but that's me. I would actually almost prefer to aim for like a kind of constructing like one of those workable kind of cryo sleep systems, and then aiming for an exoplanet because there are super Earths out there.
There
So
are.
what the heck?
Hopefully with manageable gravity and
Yeah, that's the other thing.
yeah, and fauna that are not dangerous. That's also
Yeah.
important. No
Well, I
land
mean, if
sharks.
it wasn't for like certain events on this planet, I mean, the dinosaurs would still be here. So yeah. So
and trying to eat us.
The beasts would have to be somewhat friendly.
See the end of the movie Don't Look Up for a really good example of that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Have you seen Don't Look Up?
I have. It was
Okay.
pretty funny.
Yes. No spoilers here, but it's a good movie, and the ending is poetic.
Agreed. Okay. Well, I have actually I think we've gone a half hour over what I thought to do today, but I really appreciate you making the time, and it's
been fun.
It's been so good to see your face again and just like chat and like
Yep,
actually
it's
talk about
nice
your
to see you again.
missions.
Always fun to talk about space. So anytime, Karina.